Hey everybody, welcome to the Investing Education channel. So today I would like to talk about this topic called bias. I think bias is the important thing and it's slightly off the beaten track because it's not really a focus on any particular stock or any particular investing principle per se, but it's more about the investing philosophy and the investing process. And I think it's very important because basically you want to make good decisions when you're choosing your stocks, and anything that can affect the ability to make that good decision should be something you should be very careful about and should guard against. And I mean, I'm definitely not the only one who talks about bias. In fact, I got this idea about bias by looking at some of the speeches of Charlie Munger, and I'll post some of the links to some of his speeches on the description panel, and you can take a look at those speeches, and I highly recommend that you do actually take a look. So let's get on to it and let's talk about the types of biases they are. Okay, so I'm talking from my perspective. So these are some of the biases I've seen and have encountered. So one bias I've seen is the home country bias. So I don't live in the States, right? But most of the companies I invest in actually are from the United States. And so I look at it very rationally. I mean, I know there are good companies outside the United States and there are good companies in the country I live in as well. But I don't think they're of the scale or they have the potential, or more importantly, they don't have the kind of moat that some of these other companies have. And I see a lot of people, they will be very hesitant to invest in a stock from a foreign country, and they will rather look at stocks in their own country, even if that means investing in lower quality stocks. And I don't want to make that mistake. The ultimate criteria basically when choosing a stock is the stock's moat, how strong its competitive advantage is, and what are the prospects of that particular stock. So I hope you avoid the home country bias if you live in a country which doesn't have that high quality companies. Another type of bias I see is the recency or survivorship bias. So what an example of this is when you see the stock price of a particular stock go up very quickly. So that's a recency bias because it's a recent thing, and so you think since it has gone up, it will continue to go up. Or the survivorship bias, there might be social media companies that survive now, but there were also social media companies that did not survive, and you only focus on the ones that did survive, and that might be a little short termist or myopic in outlook. So it's good to understand history. It's good to look at the total picture and to make a judgment accordingly. So I think that's very important in terms of avoiding the recency or survivorship bias. Another type of bias I think there is out there is sunk cost bias. Basically, I think this refers to the fact that you have done a lot of research on a particular stock, and since you've done so much research on the stock, you can't really exclude it from your universe, even if you don't like it, even if you discover that it's not that high quality of a stock. So because you invested so much time and research into finding out more about their stock, but if you do discover that a stock is not good enough after you have done the necessary research, then the right thing to do would be to exclude that stock and not to dig your heels deeper into something that's not good. Another type of bias I've noticed is the ideological bias. What I'm thinking about here is, some people tend to categorize themselves as either a value investor or as a growth investor or as a dividend investor or whatever. And these are all ideologies. So, I mean, the basic thing really is to look for the best stock with the highest good potential at the best price, right? So, I think it's important to caution against, pigeonholing yourself in any particular category and thus avoiding stocks that might fall into a different so-called category, and avoiding some of the better stocks actually. So I think it's very important to avoid any ideological bias as well. Another type of bias, and I'm not sure really if it's a bias or it's just a character flaw, I call it the ego bias. Basically, I mean, if you have talked about particular stock, especially if you talked about it to a friend, for example, you don't want to seem to be wrong about it. So even if that stock does badly, you keep singing its praises, and you keep thinking that it will go up and so on, that you can't be wrong. Basically, it's a very self-opinionated kind of thinking, and I think that's very important to avoid. So I try to avoid this concept of ego bias as well. Another type of bias, I think, and this bias might actually be a good bias, is the industry or job bias. You might be working in a particular field. Maybe you're working in the construction field, so you are a little biased towards construction company, or maybe you're in the payment sector. You're a little biased towards payment companies. So this can be good and bad because you want to focus on your circle of competence, stocks that you have a better understanding of. But of course, at the same time, you don't want to avoid stocks in different industries that might have even better prospects. And those stocks might not be very difficult to understand either. So it's important to look beyond your industry, beyond the particular job that you do. Another type of bias, I think I call it the confirmation bias or the ostrich effect. Basically here, you have a particular inclination to buy a stock, and you seek out evidence that supports your desire or your belief in that stock. I mean, I'm guilty of all these biases, and maybe this one as well, because when I'm researching a stock, when I read articles, maybe I subconsciously tend to look for articles that have a favorable view of the stock, when what I should be doing actually is finding articles that have an unfavorable view of the stock. I should be looking for this confirming evidence so that I can find out the best argument against buying the stock. And after reading that best argument against buying the stock, and I still feel that stock is a good buy, then that's probably the safe thing to do. So you cannot be like ostrich and ignore the negative aspects or the bad qualities of a particular stock that you like. You gotta look at it in totality, and you have to specially acknowledge the bad aspects so that you avoid the bad stocks. Another type of bias, I think, is the groupthink or bandwagon bias, as they call it. I saw this, in the bubble that was Bitcoin, last year, or the year before actually. So everyone was buying Bitcoin basically because everyone else was buying Bitcoin. And I think that's the wrong thing to do. I mean, you got to do your own research. You got to be rational. You got to think about your investments carefully. And you cannot just buy something because someone else is buying it, or because it's generally accepted as a good stock. You see a lot of scandals sometimes, right? The Enron, the WorldCom scandal, and a lot of it happened because of groupthink. Even the Madoff scandal, everyone invested in Madoff because their friends or their relatives were investing in. So how could it be wrong? So it's very important to do your own research, your own due diligence. So I've gone through some of the types of biases, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? So how do we overcome some of these biases? So these are some suggested solutions basically. First of all, I think you should be reading, right? I think reading expands your mind, and it exposes you to different viewpoints and so on, and that's really the way to get out of this fixed mindsets or these biases, so that you can develop a more rational way of thinking. I think mindfulness and introspection is very important. Basically, mindfulness to me is thinking about thinking. So why do you think about a certain thing, or why did you have this belief in the first place, and you really analyze and get to the root of a particular set of belief, and so that you really question it afterwards if it is the right belief to have or not. Another tool is what Charlie Munger calls inversion. Basically, you're looking at the opposite side of the argument in a sense, right? So if someone says a stock is good, you try to invert it and think about what could go wrong perhaps with the stock. Why could that stock not be the best stock? So you are constantly inverting, you're constantly thinking about the worst case scenario, about the opposite arguments, and you're trying to rationalize and make your thinking better. I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's very important to search for this confirming evidence. So you're always trying to read articles that don't support your stocks or not favorable to your stocks. And sometimes I find there's a lot of value in actually some of these arguments against the stock. For example, Facebook. Many people think Facebook is bad for the world in general, and overall, the monthly active users may die off, or so on, right? And sometimes I think there's a bit of logic and substance to some of the arguments. So I tend to try to read articles that go against my thinking, so I challenge my own thinking as well. And I think ultimately underlying all these solutions is really rational thinking. You don't want biases to cloud your thinking, and you always want to have logic and reason be the foundation of any decision that you make to buy a stock and to make an investment, or actually in terms of any decision at all. So guys, I hope this is useful. So let's just look at the real money portfolio. The real money portfolio is still around the same amount, I think, as the last video. No big changes. I'm looking to buy Boeing if it falls within a sweet spot. It hasn't yet, so I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. But if I do, I'll let you know in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I've given you some solutions on how to overcome our subconscious bias. So I hope this helps you in your investment journey as well. Thank you and have a great day.